Hello, Sean here. I am on the UIM, but I'm not back with another episode of the UIM. I decided to do a little bit of a different thing this week. If you somehow aren't aware, I can't imagine anyone following this channel isn't aware, but a couple days ago, we got the proposals for the new skill that's going to be added to the game in the form of sailing, taming, and shamanism. And it's been, a lot of stuff going on in the community. Of course, people, very quickly, I don't want to say they took sides, but, decided what was their favorite and what was not their favorites. And it's been fun, honestly. I've been enjoying, mainly enjoying reading, from what Jackers has been saying in their response and stuff, and just honestly getting really excited for a new skill. But there's also been a bit of confusion, I think, from people, both from partially from Jackers' fault, but mainly from people's fault of not understanding things, which I think is to be expected. But I just wanted to kind of do like a ramble video because I originally had recorded stuff like this to be included for the next episode of my UIM series, but it ended up being like 10 or 15 minutes of like recordings just talking about that, and I was like, well, I don't want that to just be the episode. So I was like, hey, why don't I just make like a shorter kind of ramble, not part of the series video, and that's what I decided to do. So I kind of just want to go through my initial, feelings toward the skills, and then also, kind of what's going to happen and clearing up, maybe trying to clear up how the process is going to work in case you, like I were, until I watched, the freaking 2 hour podcast they did, and then like the other like hour and a half Q&A they did a couple days later. There's a lot of information there. So, we're getting a new skill. I think like 80% of people in the poll from a couple months ago said they'd be interested in a new skill being added to Old School. And then a couple days ago, we got the first 3 pitches for potential skill ideas. And it's important to remember, even though we've said we want a skill at this time, and for the poll that's coming out on the 4th, I'll just refer to that as like, this time, this poll, for the one coming in a couple days. We are not voting yet which of these skills are going to be in the game. We are just saying, I think the first question is, which of the 3 skills would you like to see go into refinement, which is multiple choice. You can choose all or none of them, and there's also an option for saying, I don't want any of them. And then the second question is, which is your favorite, which is only going to be a one choice. And I don't think there's an option to say none. I think you just have to skip that one, but I could be wrong. But anyway, they're trying to find which skill is the most desirable to go towards refinement, which refinement is going to be when they actually try and start fleshing these skills out. If you'll notice, even the ones that have quite a bit of details, like sailing and shamanism in their pitches, they're still very, very basic. You don't have any idea what, like the level structure is going to look like, what the rewards are going to look like, what XP rates are going to look like. It's all very, very general. And that's, where refinements, because obviously they don't want to, spend a ton of dev time for something that's not going to be out in the game. And also, they really, really want us to be incorporating this. They stress this so much in the blog, and especially in like the podcast and Q&As they did, where it's like any little thing we want, if we don't like it, we can, send our feedback. We'll be able to vote on that, and we'll be able to change that before it's even in really like a beta phase, or definitely before we ever vote to put that into a poll. So if you have a skill that you love or hate, and you don't want it to be added, or you do want it to be added, just remember that what we're voting on in a couple days here is not going to be which is going to be added. It's just going to be which ones do you want to move forward with to actually start getting some real ideas, which then at that point, 3 months down the line, if say, shamanism wins, we can then decide like, hey, after all the different pitches back and forth, maybe we don't even want shamanism anymore, and we could go back to the drawing board. I doubt that's going to happen. I honestly, if I'm being honest, I think one of these skills is going to win, and then it's going to get refined. I think that'll be a long process, but I think the first skill we're going to get, even if it's a while, is going to be one of these 3, either sailing, taming, or shamanism. So I guess, but now's a good time to probably get into the actual skills themselves. So my first reaction when I just read the entire blog myself first, didn't try and look at any no Reddit, no social medias. I just wanted to get my own reaction. And also, I should point out, I am someone who voted. I did want a new skill. I was part of the 80%. I'm excited for a new skill, even as a UIM. I don't have much to say about that at this time. I've seen a couple people on Reddit being like, as a UIM, I'm a little worried that this skill is going to be hard to train. I'm sure any skill is going to be difficult to train, but honestly, nothing's going to be worse than like freaking Herb Lord Prayer or something, or some of the grinds we already have for UIMs. And I honestly can't see it being worse than that. So maybe down the line I'll have something more to say as that. But, you know, I want a new skill. I'm excited. And when I was reading these pitches, sailing sounded cool. And then I read taming and immediately just vibed with that for some reason. I'm not really quite sure why 100%, because I was playing RuneScape original, or Cloud, you know, RS2, RS, whatever you want to call it. I was playing that when summoning was in the game, but I have so little memory of actually interacting with summoning. I've said it many times on this channel before, but for the later days of my RuneScape career, it was all dungeoneering. That's all I did. I love that so much. So I have some, you know, familiarity with summoning, but, you know, not a lot. I'm not like sitting here like, oh, I want summoning in old school. And taming is not summoning, although it sounds very, very similar. I'm just going to say that from the skills pitch. But still, I think after having read going into shamanism, which I will say shamanism, again, sounded very cool to me in theme, but then reading more about, I'm very, very skeptical about the rewards in the form of item augmentations, which again is something that we can vote on and decide that's not even part of the skill. But that put a bad taste in my mouth. And also, if I'm being really honest here, I'm not eager to have a production / gathering skill in shamanism. I just don't think, in case you didn't realize or you didn't know, sailing and taming are both considered utility skills, which I think kind of just means that even though obviously you're going to train them and, you know, get XP for them and they'll have levels and stuff, it's mainly supposed to kind of be like a supplemental thing to other parts of the game. You know, they're not really ever going to be doing a thing like, oh, where you're like, you know, you're just, you know, summoning and then desummoning a bunch of, you know, either building or deconstructing ships, or, you know, taming and then not releasing and taming animals again. Like, that's not the idea. The idea is to have more involved gameplay that you kind of get passive, you know, XP from, rather than just kind of grinding. Whereas shamanism it's a production and a gathering skill in one. So it would be kind of like if woodcutting and fletching, obviously, you know, very general example, and not super the case because they want to make it more interesting than that. But it would be like if they were combined. So you'll have resource nodes that you collect from, and then you transform those nodes into useful materials somehow. And that, I just honestly, those are the worst skills to train for me. Not even just UM, just in general. And I don't think it would be fun. But anyway, taming. I really, really like taming. I thought it just sounded, you know, pretty cool. I like the idea of having animal companions. And I think the biggest thing for me is, it took me a couple days of thinking to figure this out, but I think taming I can immediately picture how taming would fit into the rest of these skills and the way that skills are organized from, you know, level 10, level 20, you know, level 30, all the new things you unlock. You know, for like, you know, you can pickpocket these guys, and once you get 36, you can do cave goblins, and then, you know, 45, you can do Fremnik, stuff like that. I could just clearly see how it's like, you know, you go from like sheep to bears to, you know, dragons eventually, which obviously isn't, you know, that alone is not at all a good idea for like a skill or a reason you think should be in the game, but it felt very familiar to me. Where sailing and shamanism, even though they both had parts that I thought sounded interesting, they felt very, like, my first reaction to sailing was like, this sounds super, super cool, but it feels like an expansion to the game. It doesn't feel like a skill. I'm not part of it's like a mini game crowd. I honestly don't even, like, I can't fathom that argument. It takes like so little brain power for me to realize how it's not a mini game. Like, I wish mini games were as interesting as its sailing sounded in the pitch, but I definitely wasn't sold on it as a skill when I first read it. And taming just kind of like, it felt natural to me. It felt like it's something that I could easily see being. Oh my god, what is that? Wait, what? What? What in the world is this? I literally have no idea what's going on right now. Okay, is this part of I feel like I'm doing some like scam video right now. Is this part of like a RuneLite client? Because I can't do anything with it. Well, I guess taming is the next skill, guys. You have it there. But I'm imagining they're probably going to do something there where it's like part of like the, hey, you know, a way to vote or see how it works. But maybe Alexa's listening to me or something like that. But I guess taming fits in with the skills. You can see it fit in right there. I will say it. This does look. I hardly even noticed that the total level isn't there. Although I wish it was somehow there, even though I think we can see it on this thing still. But yeah, the skill looks, a skill being there looks pretty nice. All right, well, according to Reddit, it's not just me, everyone's seeing this, and apparently it changes to the other skills based on where you're at in the game. It's like it's supposed to be like, maybe a prototype for, just so we can get used to a feel of how it would look to have other skills there. It's not, they're not just forcing taming in, guys, don't worry. But taming felt very natural to me, as I was saying, and I just vibe with that, whereas the ones I didn't vibe with as immediately. And that was like the first day. And then reading feedback, I was a little disappointed to see after being excited for taming that it was clearly in the caboose. It was the far behind sailing and shamanism in the eyes of the community. I figured there'd be a bit of support for sailing. I think it was before I was super big into old school when they pulled it, but I think it had like 65% support to be added to the game, and I think their pitch now is pretty different from what it used to be. So I figured there'd be a lot of support from that. Shamanism, this is going to be my shamanism rant, so anyone who loves shamanism, be prepared. I did not get the support from shamanism. At first, I was very cynical, and I was convinced that people just saw the augmentations. As soon as people saw that picture of the Bandos armor being enchanted, they're like, oh my gosh, yes please. Even though we pretend to complain about power creep, all we want is just to be able to make the gear we have better and, not have to worry about it losing value or something like that. We want it to be more valuable. So I figured everybody was just on that train, and it took me a while to be like, okay, I can see how, like, the vibe and the whole spirit realm thing sounds very, very interesting to me. I can get how people be behind that. Then I kept going back to the idea of like, oh, it being a production and gathering skill, and I just like, one, it made me realize I think that most people on Reddit have to be like a non-iron. And I already know irons are in the minority, but I'm pretty sure it's like the last time I heard it was kind of close to like 35% of the players were Ironmen. So, and again, I know the game isn't catered towards us, but that's actually not, I'm not trying to say it should be easier for Ironman. What I'm saying is, I don't think main accounts realize how bad the like production and gathering skills are to grind when you can't buy things. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but shamanism, they're one of the big selling points is going to be primarily a non-buyable production and gathering skill, which of course obviously we're going to be able to refine that and vote on how that would happen if it goes forward. But generally the consensus I've seen from Jagex is they want most things you gather and refine or and like tinker with or change, transform to be non-tradable, but then maybe like the final usable product would be tradable. So it's like you'd need 60 shamanism to make a potion that you could put on your sword, and all the ingredients leading up to making that potion and gathering those would be non-tradable. You couldn't buy those, but then you could trade the potion itself, so that would have value, and then people technically, like mains, wouldn't have to train their account to use that. So I guess that, would alleviate it. I can understand them being like, oh, well, we won't have to grind anyway, even if it is, a grindable skill. But I really think people should just, if you're on Team Shamanism and you haven't thought about it, just think for a second, like how boring woodcutting is, how boring mining is. Like, I'm sure, and again, people are like, oh, it's AFK, well, mining isn't, but like woodcutting is, oh, it's AFK, it's chill, and it's like, I sure they could make the skill like that, but it's like, is that really what you want? You want our first big skill to be like just doing chores and like an actual like the grind. I don't know if that's your thing. I'd love to hear why, if your reasoning behind it. I do think that the vibe is very, very cool, that the spirit realm could be super, super cool. It sounds so interesting to me, and I also can see how that can fit into parts of the game that are existing and other skills that are existing very easily. But I just I'm just not eager for another production skill. That's kind of the end all be all for me. And then lastly is sailing. I saved sailing for the end because I think that has been the one that has changed the most, my opinion has, in, seeing community feedback and especially hearing Jagex talk about it in their podcast and Q&A stuff. It's one, I will say, I love everyone. It's been mostly Mod Elena, Mod Light, and Mod Kieran, I think, have been the main three that have been, in all of these videos, so that's who I associate it with. But assuming they the views they share, or at least the vibes are representative of the team, like they seem super excited and stoked to just work on anything. And some people might say they have some clear favorites. I wouldn't agree as much. Maybe certain individuals do, but I think Mod Kieran and Mod Elena definitely seem to love everything. And it's just it had me really give me hope that they, whatever we get, no matter any of these or if it's something else entirely different, like they're happy to make it good, they're excited to make it good, and I think it's going to be good. But we're voting on the vibes right now, we're voting on which ones we want to see expanded more, and I do have some opinions. Obviously we're all going to form our opinions on that and vote accordingly. But sailing is just the way they've talked about it. Of if you haven't watched the Q&A is, I don't want to say it's like not useful, but there's a lot of like repeated stuff if you've been following everything. But if you're like really interested in the skill and you haven't watched the podcast, I'll like link it below. It's really good. It's like 2 hours long, 2.5 I think. I was fortunate to be able to watch it at work on a slow day, but it's really insightful. It made me feel really good, and also made me really excited for sailing. Just being able to explore the oceans, all the different ways they would incorporate like other skills into it, and like the way you would train it and the different activities it would unlock. It sounds really cool, but I can already, they've even said it's going to need some serious engine work, and I can just tell it's gonna be a lot. Like I think any of these skills, at least a year between now, before we'll see it in the game, even if assuming everything goes well. And just from my humble opinion of knowing nothing from the outside, I think sailing would take even longer to do, just from the engine work and all the things that's going to happen with it. Not to say it'll be stuck in dev hell or anything like that, but I think sailing will take longer than the other two. Not trying to discourage anybody. I want any skill to be perfect, but just the vibe of that sounds really interesting to me. But I'd like to hear what you guys think. Anyone who has been following this closely, any skill stand out to you? Like I said, I think I'd be happy with all of them. I just really don't want a production skill, if I'm being honest. That's the other reason I don't like shamanism. But again, I'm sure they'll, make it interesting. The community's not going to vote to have a skill that, the best XP an hour is like, 60k or something like that. I think it's going to be a fairly quick-ish skill to train. Maybe not for UIMs, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Either way, I'm just so stoked that we're having a new skill in the game, and just kind of all these the vibes around the community from the last couple days. It's been a blast to be a part of, and I'm really excited to see where we're going. And I guess just to do a little recap for anybody who's made it to the end. If you did, you're beautiful. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you so much for being here. But if I had to order my skills right now, I think sailing beats out taming for me. It's pretty close though. I'm going to vote for both sailing and taming to go on to refinement. And I probably will say, I'll say taming is my favorite skill, just because I just vibe with it so much, initially. And although I'm not voting for shamanism, in my opinion, I expect shamanism and sailing to get a serious chunk of support. I think none of these are going to win, in quotes. We're not voting for like one or the other, but I do think sailing is going to have the most support. I'd guess at least, I'm going to say 70% of people are going to say they'd like to see sailing going forward, considering there's a multiple choice question. And I'd guess maybe closer to like 55 for shamanism. That's my guess right now. So we'll see how they handle that. If they're going to be like immediately, okay, we're only going to do sailing, or maybe we'll try sailing and shamanism. I don't know. We'll see. Either way, love to hear what you guys have to say about that. If anyone on Team Shamanism can bring me over, I'd be happy to hear your arguments for that. And if anyone has any interesting taming ideas, I'd love to hear that too. I think taming suffers. I think I said taming is in there too, but taming suffers just from the pitch not being as cool sounding as sailing or shamanism, which makes it feel like it's not as fleshed out. But again, like all we're voting on for right now is literally just the theme. And then the only extra difference is with shamanism, and shamanism is also a production and gathering skill. Like even then, I guess that what that means kind of could be changed in refinement. But really, we're just voting for the vibes of shamanism. So like, do we want to the main theme to be sailing the oceans, you know, working like taming and working with animals, or kind of, you know, exploring the spiritual side of RuneScape. That's all we're voting on for right now. And we're not even voting if we want those to for sure be here. We're voting to see if we want to look into these things more. So keep that in mind when you're casting your votes. Thank you for watching, and I hope you didn't mind this ramble video. We've got a normal UIM video coming out next week, and I hope you're excited for that. Thank you. Bye bye.